We wanted to start by introducing ourselves a little bit. It's been a wonderful day. I know we've heard from people that have been here for 50 years and people that started last year. So we're somewhere in the middle. So we've been here for a couple years. My name is Hannah McCurdy-Adams. I work for an organization called Wildlife Preservation Canada. I realize your agenda says /Toronto Zoo. They were invited, but unfortunately that none of the staff that work for Toronto Zoo could make it today. So Wildlife Preservation Canada is where I work, but I grew up in Ontario. My parents would take me camping. I've lost count of the number of times I've taken the ferry up here, and we explored rivers and lakes all over Ontario. I fell in love with wildlife and, of course, found my way to snakes as a child and took a detour and came back again. And of course, I love the Massasauga rattlesnake. If you have questions, we could talk your ear off. But I also work with all reptiles and amphibians. And so from what I've been hearing today as well, I'd love to hear more about how I might be able to help with the struggle with funding that we all have. But Theodore was introduced to me a couple years ago now, and I've been able to help look for some rattlesnakes and work with different projects. And now we're at a stage where we really want to do something with the community based on what you want. And we have a lot to learn. We understand that we have a lot to learn. The WISE Lab is a lab that we look to for inspiration. And my co-presenter, if you want to say a few things about yourself.
Ani, my name is Meg. I'm of settler descent. I grew up on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people, also known as Kingston, Ontario. I'm very grateful to still live there while I do my PhD at Queen's University. Yeah. My parents. My mother was born in Canada, and my stepfather is from Kingston, Jamaica, and they raised me.
And of course, I forgot that detail as well. My mother's from England, from the UK, and I go back at least 5 generations settler Canadian. But I'm based closer to Toronto, where I live currently. And so we come today with a bit of an update on some of the Massasauga rattlesnake surveys that Theodore has been wonderful to take us out and send Steve with us to take us out on the boat. And so all of these Massasaugas were found on your lands. This is an area in Point Grundine. And these are some of the locations where we've been going, and particularly with Meg this year, you guys have taken us to some wonderful island locations, and we found some snakes. We found some places where they probably take care of their young, or sort of keep their young warm before they give birth. It's called gestation sites for rattlesnakes, and places where they hibernate, where they spend the winter. And we write down other species at risk that we see while we're out there. And for Meg's PhD research, we collect blood from the rattlesnakes, and she is in the process of doing DNA analysis. And so we'll be giving you an update once more of that is complete. It does take a very long time. And we have found different evidence of Massasaugas as well. They shed their skin, and you can sometimes figure out the species from the skin. There's a lot of different organizations, people from working for different organizations that work with us, and have been coming out on surveys as well. And so, of course, thank you to all of you for being here and for inviting us, and we hope to keep working together. We did manage to remember to take one photo while we were out on Lonely Island. So most of the organizations have someone in the photo. And here's another Massasauga rattlesnake that was found in Point Grundine. And so just a quick rundown of numbers in 2023. We found 9 Massasauga rattlesnakes, and then of course, with Meg on the team, we found a few more this year, 16. We found a ringneck snake in 2023, and then a couple of eastern milk snakes in 2024. And the eastern milk milk snake in particular has the same sort of blotch pattern that a Massasauga rattlesnake does, so you can confuse the two of them. The milk snakes are a lot skinnier than a rattlesnake, um, but they yeah. So we found those. We write down where we want. I would really like to find a ribbon snake because they're probably here. We just haven't found them. And then, of course, oh, yeah, go ahead. Unfortunately, I did not bring pictures of all the snakes on this presentation, but the ribbon snake is striped a lot like an eastern garter snake, so dark, often black or stripes and yellow stripes. And it's a very tiny scale behind their eye that's quite light, and that's a difference between a garter snake and a ribbon snake. So you do have to either get a really good camera or get up close and personal to tell the difference. Or have some if you do know them, you can spot it from a distance. I'm not at that level yet. Do they bite? Well, everything that you grab bites. uh, so I try not to grab them unless I have to. But yes, all snakes do have teeth. And of course, the eastern Massasauga has fangs that inject venom. So their bite is a lot worse than a ribbon snake or a garter snake. And we do have some pictures a little later. You've already seen some of them today about a safe way to hold a rattlesnake. But if you don't have the fancy plastic tubes like we do, a long branch or a shovel works great to lightly hook them and like get them off the road, get them out of harm's way. And of course, they have been there long before us, so leaving them be is the best course of action to most of us. Do we want to come by and get them? Can we talk later? We don't promise to take any. They do live here too. But yeah, we'd love to talk about what you've got. They are much more afraid of us than we are of them. I know we definitely get startled, but we are terrifying monsters to them. And so of course, if you leave them alone, they are more than likely going to leave you alone. They just want to hide and live their lives. So back to some of what we found. 2023 marked a potential spot that they hibernate. Like I said, we found some we've shed skins, some dead rattlesnakes, and then we wrote down the couple of monarch butterflies that we found. They're another species at risk. And here's some of the locations. And so sorry, I know the dots are a bit small, but this is Point Grandine, and there's different colored dots in different areas where we went to look for rattlesnakes. And of course, we've sent this information to the lands department, but you can find me. I can email this to you as well. And these are points from 2024 from this past season where we've also found a number of rattlesnakes. And we had some wonderful folks join us. And so sometimes people are a little unsure. This is what I was saying. This was a safe way to hold Massasauga rattlesnakes. And so the head end of the snake is in a meter-long plastic tube, and it cannot turn around in that tube. So its head is safe and our hands are safe. And then we hold the tube in a couple of fingers and the snake in a couple of fingers, so it can't shimmy its way back down out of the tube. But after a couple seconds, often, especially when you're doing it safely like this, hopefully we can change some hearts and minds. And I think with that, it's Meg's turn.
Yes, so I am doing my research on the genetics of the Massasauga rattlesnake. These are a couple of my favorite individuals. This is a very large male that we found on Fitzwilliam Island. It's named after Theodore. We found him with a female, actually. It was a mating pair. They weren't mating at the time, but they were paired. So this, I believe, Nibi Shabo means tea. And then the female was named Dor. Thought it was cute. So the Massasauga is an at-risk species. Their range used to be much bigger. It extends down into the United States. This is their presumed historical range. It was continuous all the way up through Ontario. But now all we have left here is the four small subpopulations on the map to the right. Yes. Well, I think it's probably a combination of things. Human persecution is likely one of them. But also, since we don't have any historical records of how many there ever were on Manitoulin, maybe it was always very, very small populations. We can't know that. I can try and figure out some of these answers with the genetics. Um, we'll see. So, my first objective, and actually how I was introduced to Theodore, he was very concerned about the population that is on Lonely Island because it is quite a small island and there's likely not that many individuals there. So that's when I was already doing my PhD on range-wide genetics across Ontario, and Hannah introduced me to Theodore, and we thought this would be really mutually beneficial if I could answer some of the questions he had about the rattlesnakes that you have here on your lands, how they're doing, whether they're inbreeding, whether the population is big enough to sustain itself into the future. And we can also see if the individuals on the islands are able to mate with mainland individuals. It's a possibility. Right now, we don't know the connectivity between the populations. My second objective is similar in that it's genetics as well, but I will be sequencing the entire genomes of a few individual snakes. And this is to see if there are any unique adaptations in each of the different groups. So it's possible that your Lonely Island snakes do have very unique characteristics. Um, it's been noted that the Lonely Island snakes are quite dark compared to Georgian Bay. Maybe something more similar to this, whereas Georgian Bay, they're more gray. That could have to do with habitat. It could have to do with the founder individuals who came here 7,000 years ago during a period of aridity where the water levels were low and they came up through the states. And we're just trying to figure out where these snakes came from, which ones they're most related to, and just more about them in general, their adaptations, why they look the way they do. And then finally, my last objective is to try to make population monitoring more accessible, less expensive, and quicker. So right now, the genetics that I'm doing, we are taking blood samples, and that's very invasive. We don't want to do that. It's a lot of stress on the snake, but it's the only way to get the information right now. So I'm trying to create a method where we can use shed skins or feces or swabs of the cloaca in addition to roadkill samples, which is also not ideal. But we can get information in these much less invasive ways to try and get to some of the similar answers as the blood samples. And then perhaps in the future, we won't need to take blood samples at all. Miigwech, any questions?
Did anyone have any questions? If not, is it Theodore, are you introducing who's next? Oh, go ahead.
Those snakes on the island, they're not able to migrate during the summer when they can't swim across.
So rattlesnakes can swim. They're known to swim, but that distance is pretty far. I don't think I've ever heard of a rattlesnake being able to cover that kind of distance in the water. It would be too cold for them. They would likely drown. They would get exhausted. So it's pretty unlikely that they would be able to.
probably have a lot of inbreeding on that island.
Yeah, that's what Theodore was concerned about. And my main objective is to figure out if they are inbreeding or because the masked dog rattlesnake apparently is quite tolerant to inbreeding. So even if they are, maybe they'll be okay. But yeah, if there's enough of them, they might be okay. Yep. Sure. They give live birth. So they're known as ovoviviparous, which means they do have eggs, but they're inside. And then they hatch inside the mom, and then they give birth to live young. Yeah. Yeah. What do you mean? Oh, they can't strike very far at all. Usually, to be safe, we'll say half the length of their body, but it's really closer to a third. So if it's on the ground, it'll be able to strike maybe that far. Yeah, it's not too much.
And we heard a little bit earlier today, we saw someone wearing the shin guards. That's a great way to walk around with in rattlesnake habitat. They are very, very difficult to see. I wouldn't worry too much on Manitoulin Island itself, but when you're walking outside, it's good to look at your feet so that you don't trip, but it's also a really good idea to look at your feet in case there might be a rattlesnake there when you're anywhere else, all along Eastern Georgian Bay, Soggy and Bruce Peninsula. They do have rattlesnakes there, and one of the best things to do is to watch your feet. Wear closed-toed shoes and pay attention to where you put your hands. Don't just climb anywhere. If you do get bitten, of course, get yourself to a hospital. There, you will be fine, but it could be very painful. They're just get yourself to a hospital. But beforehand, just watch where you step. It helps a lot. And listen, listen for that buzz.
Awesome. Thank you. So I guess this concludes the this great information day that every participant or what do we call these people? Presenters. They did a great job. And like I said, it concludes this day, and I think that